I'm Jessica Mitchell, 31, a marketing specialist at Apex Digital Solutions. After 5 dedicated years, I was blindsided when my coworker Rachel Thompson got the promotion I'd been working toward. She'd spent months systematically sabotaging my work, exposing mistakes that I never actually made. My reputation was shattered, my confidence destroyed, and my financial future derailed. But what Rachel didn't count on was my determination to uncover the truth and reclaim what I'd earned. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted professionally, my story might feel uncomfortably familiar. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and stick around to see how I turned this career nightmare into my greatest professional triumph. When I joined Apex Digital Solutions 5 years ago, I was thrilled to land a position with such a respected digital marketing agency. Our company handled campaigns for Fortune 500 clients, and the fast-paced environment attracted ambitious professionals. Despite the competitive atmosphere, there was always a sense of collaborative spirit, at least that's what I believed until last year. My track record at Apex was impressive. I'd consistently exceeded my targets, bringing in 3 major accounts that collectively added over $2 million in annual revenue. My campaigns for Blue Wave Electronics won 2 industry awards, and my work on the Highland Sportswear rebrand increased their online conversion rates by 43%. I'd established myself as a reliable, creative strategist who could execute under pressure. Linda Harris, our VP of Marketing, had taken me under her wing early on. A marketing veteran in her early 50s with an impressive industry network, Linda recognized my potential and often included me in high-level strategy sessions. "You've got both creative vision and analytical skill that's rare," she told me during my 4th-year review. Her mentorship was invaluable, though her frequent travel to our international offices meant she wasn't always present day to day. My direct boss, Mark Stevens, was the marketing director, a competent but somewhat insecure manager in his 40s who'd been with the company for 8 years. Mark was good at execution but struggled with office politics. He valued measurable results but was easily swayed by perception and the opinions of others, especially those higher up the corporate ladder. While he appreciated my consistent performance, he wasn't as strong an advocate as Linda. Rachel Thompson joined Apex 3 years after I did. At 28, she was a few years younger than me, but projected an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. She came from a smaller agency with a portfolio that showed potential but lacked the major client experience that most of us had. What Rachel lacked in depth, she made up for in social savvy. Within months, she'd built strong relationships throughout the company, from administrative staff to C-suite executives. She had a knack for inserting herself into conversations and projects where she could gain visibility. Initially, Rachel and I had a cordial relationship. We collaborated on the Sportflex campaign, dividing responsibilities based on our strengths. I handled strategy and content development while Rachel managed client communications. The project was successful, and Rachel was effusive in her praise of our partnership during the wrap-up presentation, though I noticed she emphasized her contributions, while minimizing the weeks I'd spent developing the campaign architecture. Tyler Wilson, a senior account manager, often worked alongside both Rachel and me. At 37, Tyler was respected for his straightforward approach and deep understanding of our clients' industries. He kept largely to himself, avoiding office politics while maintaining professional relationships with everyone. Tyler had been at Apex for 7 years and had seen the company evolve through multiple leadership changes. While not particularly close with either Rachel or me, his neutral perspective would later prove crucial. Our CEO, Danielle Bennett, had built Apex from a 3-person consultancy to a 150-person agency over 12 years. Known for her sharp business acumen and no-nonsense approach, Danielle rarely involved herself in department-level issues but expected excellence throughout the organization. She valued results above all else and had little patience for excuses or interpersonal drama. Last June, the company announced that our department would be restructured, creating a new marketing manager position that would oversee 3 team leads. The role would include a significant salary bump, nearly 30% more than I was making, plus equity options and increased decision-making authority. Based on seniority and performance, I was widely considered the frontrunner for the position. "You've earned this opportunity," Linda told me during our monthly check-in. "Your numbers speak for themselves, and you already informally lead most of the team projects." The news of the upcoming promotion triggered subtle but noticeable changes in Rachel's behavior. Her previously friendly demeanor cooled, replaced by a competitive edge that manifested in various ways. She began speaking up more in meetings, sometimes interrupting me to reframe my ideas as her own. I noticed her scheduling coffee chats with senior directors and executives meetings that weren't related to her current projects. Most concerning was how Rachel began positioning herself as an authority on campaigns she had minimal involvement in. During a department update, she referred to our strategy for the Meridian Project, a campaign I had conceptualized and executed with minimal input from anyone else. "I just want to be thorough in my understanding of all our department initiatives," she explained when I questioned her afterward. "As we grow, we all need to be able to speak to each other's work." The explanation seemed reasonable, but something about her tone left me uneasy. By early fall, I noticed Rachel spending more time in Mark's office behind closed doors. Twice, their conversation abruptly changed when I entered the room. When I asked Mark about these meetings, he brushed it off as general department planning. "Rachel has some interesting perspectives on our workflow efficiency," he added, though he couldn't provide specific examples when I pressed for details. Despite these subtle warning signs, I remained focused on my work, confident that my consistent performance and institutional knowledge would speak for themselves when promotion decisions were made. I had built strong client relationships, mentored junior team members, and consistently delivered results that exceeded expectations. The marketing manager role felt like the natural next step in my career progression, and I was ready for the new challenge. Little did I know that Rachel had already set in motion a calculated plan to undermine everything I had worked for. The first incident happened during our quarterly presentation for Titan Industries, our largest client. I had spent nearly 3 months developing a comprehensive digital strategy to expand their market share in emerging economies. The presentation represented hundreds of hours of research, analysis, and creative development from myself and my team. The morning of the presentation, I arrived an hour early to ensure everything was perfect. After a final review of my slides, I stepped out for 30 minutes to join the pre-meeting with our account team. When I returned to the conference room, the executive team from Titan was already filing in, along with Mark, Rachel, and several other Apex colleagues. As I began my presentation, everything flowed smoothly until I reached the critical data section, showcasing year-over-year growth projections. The numbers on my slides didn't match my notes or the data I had meticulously compiled. Where I had calculated a 27% potential increase in Southeast Asian markets, the slide now showed 72%. The competitive analysis comparing Titan to their 3 major competitors showed percentage differences that were significantly skewed from my original calculations. "Jessica," Rachel interrupted, her voice carrying a note of concern that seemed genuine to everyone except me. "I think there's an inconsistency in your data. The growth projections you're presenting don't align with the market analysis on the previous slide." All eyes turned to me as I fumbled with my notes, trying to make sense of the discrepancy. The Titan CEO frowned as I attempted to explain that something wasn't right with the presentation. "Perhaps we should take a 5-minute break while Jessica sorts this out," Mark suggested, his disappointment evident in the tight set of his jaw. During those 5 excruciating minutes, I frantically compared the presentation file to my backup materials. The numbers had definitely been changed. But how? When? I had reviewed everything just that morning. "Technical issues happen to everyone," Rachel offered as the others stepped out. "Do you want me to help you fix this quickly? I noticed the errors earlier but thought you might have updated the data intentionally." "You noticed earlier? Why didn't you say something before the client arrived?" I asked, my suspicion growing. "I only glanced at it briefly," she replied smoothly. "I assumed you knew what you were doing." We resumed the presentation with corrected figures, but the damage was done. The Titan executives exchanged skeptical glances throughout the remainder of the meeting, and their questions carried an edge of doubt that hadn't been there before. After the clients left, Mark pulled me aside. "What happened in there?" he demanded. "Titan has been our client for 7 years. They expect precision, not amateur mistakes." "I don't understand it myself," I admitted. "The numbers were correct when I reviewed the presentation this morning. Someone must have altered the file." Mark's expression made it clear he wasn't convinced. "Jessica, if you're overwhelmed with your workload, you need to speak up before it affects client relationships." That evening, I stayed late to investigate. With help from Jim in IT, I discovered that my presentation file had indeed been modified at 9:47 a.m. during the pre-meeting I'd attended. The system logs showed the file had been accessed from a computer logged in under Rachel's credentials. The next morning, I confronted Rachel in the break room. "The presentation files were changed from your computer yesterday morning," I stated flatly, watching her reaction carefully. Rachel's eyes widened in what appeared to be genuine surprise. "That's impossible. I was in the creative brief with the design team at that time." She paused, seeming to consider. "Could someone have used my computer while I stepped away? I might have left it unlocked." Her response was so convincing that I momentarily questioned my suspicions. Maybe it was just an unfortunate coincidence? "Look, Jessica," she continued, her voice softening with apparent concern. "I know how hard you worked on that presentation. I'd never sabotage a colleague's work. We're on the same team." I approached Mark later that day, explaining what I'd found and my conversation with Rachel. He listened impassively before responding. "Without concrete proof that Rachel deliberately tampered with your files, there's nothing I can do. The logs only show her computer was used, not who was sitting behind it." He sighed. "Let's focus on rebuilding Titan's confidence rather than pointing fingers." Over the next few days, I found myself second-guessing everything. Could I have made those errors myself and forgotten? Was I so stressed about the promotion that I was becoming paranoid? The logical part of my brain knew the numbers had been deliberately changed, but without irrefutable proof, my accusation sounded like the desperate excuse of someone who had made a costly mistake. The incident created a subtle but perceptible shift in how my colleagues viewed me. Where there had been respect and confidence before, I now detected traces of doubt. Rachel, meanwhile, expressed nothing but sympathy for my difficult situation, further cementing the narrative that I had simply made careless errors under pressure. What I didn't realize then was that this was just the opening move in Rachel's carefully orchestrated campaign to undermine my standing and position herself for the promotion we both wanted. Over the next 3 months, a disturbing pattern emerged. What initially seemed like isolated incidents gradually revealed themselves as calculated moves in Rachel's campaign to sabotage my work and reputation. 2 weeks after the Titan presentation, our team was finalizing specifications for new marketing materials from our primary print vendor. I had spent days detailing exact requirements for paper, stock, finish, and dimensions for a luxury client's catalog. The morning after I submitted the finalized specifications, our vendor called Mark directly, confused about the contradictory instructions they had received. "We got your email changing the paper stock and finished late yesterday," the vendor explained when I called to clarify. "But these new specifications will increase the cost by 40% and push delivery beyond the client's launch date." I rushed to my sent items folder and found the email in question, sent from my account at 1:37 p.m. the previous day, precisely when I had been away from my desk having lunch with the creative team. The email authorized changes I never would have approved, using industry terminology that showed the sender had significant knowledge of print production. When I brought this to Mark's attention, his patience was visibly wearing thin. First the presentation data. Now this, he noted with a frown. "Jessica, these mistakes are becoming a pattern, and they're costly. This change order will add $22,000 to the project budget." "I didn't send this email," I insisted. "I was at lunch with Allison and Derek when it was sent. They can confirm I wasn't at my computer." Mark sighed heavily. "Maybe someone accessed your computer, or maybe you forgot. Either way, we need to solve this immediately." Rachel has connections at Westlake Printers. Let's see if she can help us expedite a solution. Of course, Rachel swooped in with industry contacts who could save the day with rush production at only a 15% premium. She was lauded for her quick thinking and network of resources, while I was left looking incompetent. The following month, I discovered that a crucial deadline for our quarterly marketing materials had been missed. When Mark called me into his office, furious that the materials wouldn't be ready for an important trade show, I was completely blindsided. "What do you mean we missed the deadline?" I asked, confused. "It's scheduled for next Thursday." Mark showed me the calendar invitation from my email. The deadline had been changed to the previous Friday, without my knowledge or recollection. Despite my protests, the evidence showed the change had come from my account, and I had apparently accepted the updated invitation. Rachel, conveniently, had prepared alternative materials for another client that could be quickly repurposed to fill the gap at the trade show. Her foresight was praised during the next department meeting, while I received a formal warning about attention to detail and project management. The final incident before the promotion announcement involved a budget spreadsheet for the upcoming fiscal year. I had meticulously prepared projections based on historical data and growth forecasts. The day after submitting the completed file to Mark, he called me into his office, visibly annoyed. "The formula errors in this spreadsheet completely invalidate our Q3 and Q4 projections," he said, turning his monitor to show me the document. Finance caught it immediately. If we had presented this to the executive team, we would have looked completely unprofessional. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The carefully structured formulas I had created had been altered, creating calculation errors that significantly inflated certain expense categories while understating revenue projections. Once again, file access logs showed the document had been modified after my final review, and once again, it was impossible to prove I hadn't simply made careless errors. Rachel's behavior in team meetings also shifted subtly but significantly. She began questioning my strategic recommendations with seemingly innocent but undermining comments. "That's an interesting approach, Jessica. Have you considered that our audience demographics have shifted since your last campaign? I'm not sure the data supports such an aggressive timeline. Maybe we should build in more buffer?" Each question was framed as constructive input, but the cumulative effect was to cast doubt on my judgment and expertise. Meanwhile, Rachel positioned herself as thoughtful and thorough, often preparing supplementary analyses that highlighted alternative approaches to my recommendations. The stress began taking a serious toll on my well-being. I started double and triple checking every document, email, and calculation, which slowed my productivity and made me seem hesitant in meetings. I grew anxious about leaving my computer unattended for even a few minutes, and I became reluctant to speak up in group settings, fearing Rachel would find some way to twist my words or ideas. Sleep became elusive as I lay awake analyzing interactions and trying to anticipate where the next attack might come from. My friends noticed the change, commenting on my distraction and diminished enthusiasm when we met for our weekly dinner gatherings. "You're not yourself lately," my best friend Megan observed one evening. "Is everything okay at work?" I wanted to explain, but how could I without sounding paranoid? "Just dealing with some challenging dynamics," I replied vaguely, unwilling to voice my suspicions without concrete proof. As my confidence eroded, my isolation grew. Colleagues who had previously sought my input began turning to Rachel instead, perceiving her as more reliable and composed. She had successfully created a narrative where she was the rising star, and I was increasingly viewed as someone struggling to maintain previous performance levels. I began documenting everything meticulously, saving multiple versions of files, taking screenshots of completed work, keeping logs of when I was away from my desk. But proving sabotage after the fact was nearly impossible, especially when the evidence pointed to my own accounts and credentials as the source of the problems. Linda, who might have recognized what was happening, was traveling extensively during this period, opening new offices in Europe and Asia. Our check-ins became less frequent, and when we did speak, I hesitated to share my suspicions without solid evidence, fearing I would come across as making excuses for declining performance. In a particularly low moment, I considered resigning. Perhaps finding a new position elsewhere would be better than watching my professional reputation disintegrate day by day. But something in me refused to be driven out by underhanded tactics. I had worked too hard, contributed too much value to simply walk away. Instead, I adopted a strategy of extreme caution. I created private cloud backups of all important documents, established separate passwords for critical accounts, and began keeping a detailed log of every interaction with Rachel and any subsequent issues with my work. I couldn't prove what had happened in the past, but perhaps I could catch her in the act moving forward. What I didn't realize was that the situation was about to come to a head, as the long-anticipated promotion decision loomed on the horizon. On a cold Monday morning in January, the company-wide email everyone had been anticipating finally arrived in our inboxes. The subject line read Marketing Manager Position. Application Process. Danielle's message outlined the formal procedure. Interested candidates would submit applications by Friday, followed by interviews and presentations to the executive team the following week. Despite the recent series of mistakes that had damaged my standing, I was determined to pursue the position I had worked toward for years. I spent evenings and the entire weekend crafting my application, detailing my contributions to the company's growth, the successful campaigns I had spearheaded, and my vision for the marketing department's future. Rachel and I passed each other in the kitchen the day applications were due. She offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "May the best candidate win," she said, raising her coffee mug in a mock toast. "Indeed," I replied, maintaining my composure despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. The interview process was rigorous. First came individual meetings with Mark, Linda, and the HR director. Then each candidate delivered a presentation to the executive team outlining their strategy for growing the department and increasing client acquisition over the next 2 years. I poured everything into my preparation, knowing this might be my last chance to correct the false narrative about my recent performance. My presentation incorporated innovative approaches to digital marketing that none of our competitors were utilizing, backed by solid research and data. I practiced relentlessly, anticipating every possible question. On presentation day, I arrived an hour early, checked my slides one final time, and then stored the file on my secure cloud drive rather than the company server. I wasn't taking any chances with last-minute modifications. When my turn came, I delivered what I knew was the best presentation of my career. The engagement from the executive team was encouraging. They asked thoughtful questions that allowed me to showcase my knowledge and vision. Even Danielle, typically reserved in her reactions, nodded appreciatively at several of my proposed strategies. Rachel presented immediately after me. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see the executives leaning forward, apparently equally engaged with her presentation. Her confident gestures and animated expressions suggested she was connecting well with the audience. Then began the excruciating week of waiting for the decision. I threw myself into my current projects, trying to focus on deliverables rather than obsessing over the promotion outcome. Still, each time Mark or Linda walked past my desk without making eye contact, my stomach tightened with anxiety. The news came on Friday afternoon. Mark called me into his office, where Linda was already seated, her expression carefully neutral. I knew immediately. "We wanted to speak with you directly before the announcement goes out," Mark began, uncomfortable but trying to maintain a professional tone. "After careful consideration, we've decided to offer the marketing manager position to Rachel." Though I had anticipated this outcome, hearing the words spoken aloud felt like a physical blow. I struggled to maintain my composure as Mark continued. "This was a difficult decision. You've been with us longer and have contributed significantly to our growth." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "However, recent performance issues and concerns about attention to detail ultimately influenced our decision. Rachel has demonstrated exceptional problem-solving abilities and consistency, particularly in the past few months." I couldn't help but notice the irony. Rachel was being rewarded for solving problems she had created. Linda spoke up, her tone gentler than Mark's. "Jessica, I know this is disappointing. I want you to know that your creative vision and strategic thinking are still highly valued here. There will be other opportunities for advancement as we continue to grow. May I ask what specific performance issues factored into the decision? I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. Mark shifted uncomfortably. The Titan presentation errors, the missed deadline for the trade show materials, the budget spreadsheet problems. These incidents suggested a pattern of decreasing attention to detail that raised concerns about readiness for a management role. I wanted to protest, to explain that these weren't my mistakes, but without proof, my objections would sound like bitter excuses. Instead, I thanked them for the feedback, assured them I would continue to give my best to the company, and somehow made it back to my desk without breaking down. The official announcement went out an hour later. Congratulatory messages for Rachel flooded the company chat, while sympathetic glances were directed my way. Rachel herself stopped by my desk, the picture of gracious victory. I hope we can continue to work well together, Jessica. I've always valued your creative perspective, and I'll be counting on your experience as I transition into this role. Her words were perfect, impossible to object to, without seeming petty, but the gleam of satisfaction in her eyes told the real story. She had orchestrated this outcome meticulously, and no one except me knew the truth. That evening, I sat in my car in the empty parking garage, finally allowing the tears to flow freely. 5 years of dedication, countless late nights, successful campaigns that had significantly grown the company's revenue, all undermined by a carefully crafted series of sabotage that I couldn't prove. I considered my options. Finding another job was the obvious choice, but the thought of starting over elsewhere, rebuilding my professional reputation from scratch, filled me with exhaustion. Additionally, in our relatively specialized industry, I would likely need references from Apex. References that would now include mentions of attention to detail concerns. My phone lit up with messages from friends wanting to meet for drinks, offering comfort and commiseration. I appreciated their support, but couldn't face explaining the situation just yet. Instead, I drove home, ordered takeout, and spent the weekend alternating between bouts of anger, despair, and finally, as Sunday evening approached, cold determination. If I left now, Rachel's tactics would succeed completely. She would have the position she wanted, and I would disappear, my reputation damaged and my confidence shattered. The injustice of it burned inside me, gradually transforming my despair into resolve. I didn't have proof of what she had done yet, but if Rachel had been methodical in her sabotage, she had likely left traces that could be uncovered with the right approach. I had allowed myself one weekend to grieve the loss of the promotion. Now it was time to fight back. Monday morning, I arrived at work with a renewed sense of purpose and a carefully constructed plan. The first phase was information gathering, and I needed technical expertise beyond my own capabilities. That evening, I met Cameron, an IT security specialist friend from college, at a coffee shop far from the office. After swearing him to confidentiality, I explained my situation in detail. "So you think she's accessing your computer and accounts somehow?" he asked, his expression grave. "I'm certain of it," I replied. "The timing of the mistakes is too perfect, and they all required insider knowledge of my projects." Cameron nodded thoughtfully. "There are a few ways she could be doing this. A keylogger is the most likely it's malware that records your keystrokes, including passwords. Or she could have installed remote access software while you were away from your desk. Can you help me find out? I can't directly access your work computer that would cross some ethical and legal lines, but I can show you what to look for and how to set up some traps to catch her in the act." For the next 2 hours, Cameron educated me about digital forensics and security. He explained how to check for unauthorized software, examine server logs, and create tracking mechanisms within documents that would record who accessed them and what changes were made. "The key is to make her think she's still operating undetected," Cameron advised. "If she realizes you're onto her, she'll either stop and deny everything or get more sophisticated in her methods." Armed with this knowledge, I implemented a multi-layered strategy. First, I created dummy files with enticing names like Q2, strategy, draft and performance, review. Notes that contained tracking pixels, invisible images that would send me an alert when the document was opened, along with IP information. I discovered a USB device plugged into the back of my computer tower, small enough to go unnoticed unless specifically searching for it. After researching the model number online, my suspicions were confirmed. It was a hardware keylogger, recording everything I typed, including passwords. Rather than removing it immediately, I left it in place but began using a complex system of password management that would render the captured information useless. Working late one evening when the office was nearly empty, I carefully examined the access logs for our departmental server. The pattern was clear. My files had been accessed multiple times outside my normal working hours, often late in the evening or early morning before most employees arrived. The access points varied sometimes from Rachel's credentials, sometimes from mine, suggesting she had indeed obtained my login information. My breakthrough came when I discovered Rachel had gained access to my email account. The email forwarding settings had been modified to send a copy of all my messages to a Gmail account I didn't recognize. This explained how she knew about meetings, deadlines, and project details without being directly involved. The forwarding rule had been created 3 months ago, precisely when the mistakes began occurring. I needed evidence that Rachel was physically accessing my computer, not just remotely manipulating files. I strategically positioned my desk plant to partially obscure my computer monitor, but provide a clear view from the security camera in the corner of our open office. Then I waited. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Rachel announced she had an early doctor's appointment and would be arriving at 10:30 the next day. I made a point of mentioning I had a 9 a.m. client call that would likely run until noon. Instead of attending my call from my desk as usual, I joined from a small conference room with a direct line of sight to my workspace. At 9:15, Rachel appeared, dressed for work despite her supposed appointment. Looking around casually to ensure no one was paying attention, she sat at my desk and began typing rapidly on my keyboard. I immediately texted Tyler, who was sitting at his desk nearby. "Can you casually walk by my desk and notice Rachel using my computer? Don't make it obvious you think anything's wrong." Tyler, always observant but typically uninvolved in office politics, did exactly as I asked. Later, he stopped by the conference room. "That was weird," he commented. "Rachel was definitely going through your email. When I asked if she needed help finding something, she said you had asked her to send some files to a client while you were on your call. Did I mention anything about that to you?" I asked. "No, and you usually loop me in on client communications since I manage those accounts. Would you be willing to document what you saw if necessary?" Tyler considered this for a moment. "I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but I don't like dishonesty. If someone asks me directly what I observed, I'll tell the truth." This was a start, but I needed more concrete evidence. Over the next 2 weeks, I methodically built my case. 1. I obtained server logs showing file access patterns that couldn't be explained by legitimate work reasons. 2. I documented multiple instances of my dummy documents being accessed from Rachel's computer when I wasn't sharing them. 3. I photographed the hardware keylogger and documented its installation location. 4. I saved screenshots of the unauthorized email forwarding rule, including creation date and the destination address. Woo! I noted dates and times when security camera footage would show Rachel at my desk during my absence. The most damning evidence came unexpectedly. Linda returned from an extended business trip to Asia and requested a meeting to check in about my adjustment to Rachel's new role as my manager. "I've been sensing tension," she began. "I know the promotion decision was disappointing." Rather than immediately revealing my investigation, I asked a question. "Have you ever experienced a colleague deliberately undermining your work?" Linda's expression shifted subtly. "Why do you ask?" "I'm trying to understand some patterns I've noticed." Linda was quiet for a moment. "I received an interesting email last week from Alex Chen at Visionary Media. He mentioned that Rachel had worked at their agency before joining us." She paused. "He was surprised to hear she'd been promoted, given what happened there." "What did happen?" I asked, my pulse quickening. Apparently, Rachel was involved in a similar situation with her top account manager. Crucial presentations were compromised. Client communications were mishandled. The account manager eventually resigned after her reputation was damaged. Alex only mentioned it because he saw Rachel's promotion announced on LinkedIn and was concerned. This revelation was exactly what I needed. A pattern of behavior that extended beyond my isolated experience. With Linda's permission, I reached out to Alex directly and learned that Rachel's former colleague, Melissa Gray, was willing to speak with me about her experience. Our conversation confirmed my worst suspicions. Melissa described tactics nearly identical to what I had experienced: altered presentations, missed deadlines, damaged client relationships, all coincidentally benefiting Rachel's career advancement. I never could prove it was deliberate, Melissa explained. By the time I realized what was happening, the damage to my reputation was too extensive to repair. I chose to leave rather than fight a losing battle. I'm not making the same choice, I told her. I have evidence. As I gathered my case, Rachel grew increasingly bold in her new managerial role. She began assigning me unreasonable deadlines, excluding me from important client meetings, and questioning my strategic decisions in front of colleagues. Each time I successfully completed a difficult assignment, she found ways to minimize my contribution or identify minor flaws that overshadowed the overall quality of the work. The moral dilemma I faced was how to present my evidence without appearing vindictive or obsessed. A direct accusation without careful framing could easily backfire, making me seem like a disgruntled employee unable to accept being passed over for promotion. Linda provided the guidance I needed. Evidence speaks for itself, she advised. Present the facts objectively, without emotion or accusation. Let the pattern tell the story. With my case meticulously compiled and a strategy for presentation in place, I prepared for the confrontation that would either vindicate me or potentially end my career at Apex. The opportunity for confrontation arrived sooner than I anticipated. 3 weeks into her new role as marketing manager, Rachel assigned me the BlackRock software pitch, a potential client that would significantly expand our technology portfolio if secured. The timeline was brutal. A comprehensive marketing strategy with full creative concepts due in just 4 business days. For a presentation Rachel would deliver to the client. I know it's tight, Rachel acknowledged with feigned concern when assigning the project, but I selected you because of your experience in the tech sector. This is your chance to demonstrate your value to the team under the new structure. The subtext was clear. This was both a test and an opportunity for failure. The scope of work normally required at least 2 weeks with a full team. By assigning it to me alone with an impossible timeline, Rachel was setting me up for another prominent miss that would cement the narrative about my declining performance. I accepted the assignment without protest, then worked around the clock for 4 days. I leveraged every industry contact I had to gather competitive intelligence, developed 3 distinct creative approaches backed by market research, and built a presentation that addressed the client's needs while showcasing our agency's unique capabilities. I submitted the completed presentation a full 2 hours before the deadline, then immediately made a secure copy. Rachel's response was a terse, "Thanks, I'll review it email." The client meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. the following day. Knowing Rachel's pattern, I arrived at the office at 6:30 a.m. and found what I expected. Rachel was already there, making significant alterations to my presentation. The tracking software I had installed on the document was sending real-time notifications to my phone, showing her replacing key strategy elements with approaches that contradicted the client's stated objectives. Instead of confronting her immediately, I returned to my car and waited. At 8:45, I entered the office as if just arriving, greeting colleagues casually while noting Rachel's smug expression when our paths crossed in the hallway. "All set for the BlackRock presentation?" she asked. I made a few minor adjustments for clarity. "Looking forward to it," I replied with a smile that confused her. What Rachel didn't know was that I had received a crucial piece of information the previous evening. Danielle would be attending the presentation, as BlackRock's CEO was a former colleague of hers who had specifically requested her presence. At 9:55, we gathered in the main conference room. Rachel, Mark, the sales director, Danielle, and, unexpectedly, Linda were present to greet the BlackRock team. Rachel distributed printed copies of the presentation while making small talk with the clients. When everyone was seated, Rachel began with an introduction that subtly undermined me while taking implied credit for the strategic direction. Before we dive into the presentation Jessica prepared, I want to note that while she developed the initial concepts, I've refined the strategy to better align with BlackRock's market position and growth objectives. I waited for her to advance to the first content slide before speaking up. Actually, I said calmly, I'd like to clarify something before we continue. I reached into my bag and removed a folder. There appear to be two different versions of this presentation. I have here the strategy I submitted yesterday, and I noticed the version being presented today contains significant changes. Rachel's expression froze as I distributed copies of my original presentation to everyone at the table. I thought it might be helpful for us to review both approaches, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. The differences are quite instructive. This is highly irregular, Rachel interjected, a flash of panic crossing her features. Jessica, we can discuss your concerns after the meeting. Danielle, however, was already comparing the two documents with a furrowed brow. I'm interested in understanding the strategic differences here. Please continue, Jessica. For the next 10 minutes, I methodically highlighted the changes Rachel had made, replacements that contradicted BlackRock's stated objectives and would have resulted in a strategy misaligned with their needs. The clients began asking pointed questions about the modifications, clearly confused by the contradictory approaches. It seems there's been a misunderstanding, Rachel attempted, her composure cracking. I was merely trying to strengthen Jessica's initial concepts. By replacing the primary market positioning strategy, BlackRock CMO questioned skeptically, the original approach Jessica developed aligns perfectly with our Q3 objectives as we discussed last week. Danielle's expression had hardened. I think we need to take a brief pause. Would our BlackRock colleagues mind giving us a few minutes? After the client stepped out, Danielle turned to me. Jessica, what's going on here? This was the moment I had prepared for. Instead of launching into accusations, I presented the facts objectively. This isn't an isolated incident, I began, opening my laptop. Over the past several months, I've documented a pattern of my work being altered without my knowledge, always in ways that made me appear incompetent while positioning Rachel favorably. I displayed the evidence chronologically, server logs showing access to my files, email forwarding rules sending my communications to Rachel's personal account, and security camera footage showing Rachel at my desk during my absence. The hardware keylogger attached to my computer, I continued, showing photographs, explains how Rachel obtained my passwords. Tyler observed her accessing my email without authorization. I nodded toward Tyler, who had joined us at Danielle's request. I saw Rachel at Jessica's computer last Thursday morning, Tyler confirmed reluctantly. When I asked what she was doing, she claimed Jessica had asked her to send files to a client, which wasn't consistent with our usual workflow. Mark looked stunned, while Linda's expression suggested she had already suspected something amiss. Danielle remained impassive, processing the information without revealing her thoughts. Rachel's defense shifted rapidly from denial to deflection. This is absurd. Jessica is clearly unable to accept that she didn't get the promotion. She's fabricated this elaborate conspiracy because she can't admit her own mistakes. The evidence isn't fabricated, I countered calmly. The logs, timestamps, and system records all come directly from our company servers and can be verified by IT. Additionally, I continued, meeting Danielle's gaze directly, this appears to be a pattern that extends beyond Apex. I've spoken with Melissa Gray, who experienced nearly identical sabotage when working with Rachel at Visionary Media. This final piece of information visibly rattled Rachel. Her eyes widened in recognition, and her next attempt at defense sounded hollow even to her own ears. That was a completely different situation. Melissa was incompetent and tried to blame others for her failures, just like Jessica is doing now. Danielle had heard enough. Rachel, please wait in my office. Mark, please ask IT to secure Rachel's computer immediately for investigation. Linda, please reschedule the BlackRock presentation for tomorrow. Her tone left no room for discussion. As Rachel was escorted out, she turned to me in the hallway, her composure finally breaking completely. You think you're so clever? You were too naive, too trusting you didn't deserve that promotion anyway. In this industry, you have to take what you want. It's never given freely. Her inadvertent confession, witnessed by both Linda and Tyler, was the final confirmation of what I had worked so methodically to prove. The next 48 hours unfolded in a whirlwind of meetings, investigations, and revelations. Immediately following the confrontation, Danielle called an emergency session with the executive team, where I presented my evidence in detail. The IT department conducted a forensic analysis of both Rachel's and my computers, confirming the unauthorized access and documenting the hardware keylogger that had been installed on my machine. The level of premeditation here is disturbing, commented our CTO after reviewing the technical evidence. This wasn't opportunistic. It was a calculated campaign executed over months. HR launched a formal investigation, interviewing team members individually about their observations of both Rachel's and my work over the preceding months. Several colleagues recalled instances where Rachel had subtly undermined my contributions or positioned herself to receive credit for successful projects I had led. I did notice that Rachel often reframed Jessica's ideas in meetings, admitted one junior team member. She'd say something like building on Jessica's initial thoughts, and then present what was essentially the same concept as if it were a significant improvement. Meanwhile, Rachel was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. Her company accounts were suspended, and she was escorted from the building by security. A humiliating exit witnessed by many colleagues who had just days earlier been congratulating her on her promotion. The most surprising development came when a former Apex employee named David, who had left the company a year earlier, reached out to HR after hearing about the situation through industry connections. Rachel did the same thing to me in the content department, he revealed in a conference call with HR and the executive team. Small changes to my copy that created errors, missed notifications about deadline changes. I eventually requested a transfer to another team, but when that was denied, I resigned. I never had proof it was deliberate, so I didn't say anything at the time. As the full picture emerged, I experienced a complex mix of emotions. Vindication. Certainly, the truth I had known for months was finally being acknowledged. But there was also lingering hurt and betrayal that ran deeper than I had anticipated. The experience had fundamentally changed how I viewed workplace relationships and professional trust. I found myself questioning interactions with colleagues I had previously considered friends. Had they noticed what was happening and remained silent? Had some privately believed the narrative about my declining performance? The uncertainty left me feeling isolated, even as many expressed support and regret for not recognizing the situation sooner. My anger toward Mark was particularly difficult to process. As my direct manager, he had accepted the pattern of mistakes without deeper investigation, readily believing I was becoming careless rather than considering alternative explanations. When Mark requested a private meeting a week after the confrontation, his discomfort was evident. "I owe you an apology," he began awkwardly. "I should have looked more carefully at what was happening instead of accepting the most obvious explanation." "You were my manager," I responded, not hiding my disappointment. "Your job was to develop and protect your team members, not just evaluate their output." "You're right," he acknowledged. "I failed you in that respect. I've been doing a lot of thinking about my leadership approach and where it fell short." While I appreciated his acknowledgement, rebuilding professional trust would take more than a single conversation. Linda, in contrast, had maintained faith in my capabilities, despite the concerning incidents, and her support during the investigation proved invaluable. "I've seen your work for years," she told me. "The sudden change in performance never made sense to me. which is why I started asking questions when I returned from Asia. I just wish I'd been more present when this began. 10 days after the confrontation, Danielle called me into her office. The company had completed its ethics investigation and reached a decision about Rachel. The evidence is unequivocal, Danielle stated. Rachel engaged in deliberate sabotage over an extended period, compromising not only your work but potentially client relationships and company reputation. Her employment has been terminated, effective immediately. I nodded, having expected this outcome given the overwhelming evidence. What I hadn't anticipated was Danielle's next statement. "We'd like to offer you the marketing manager position," she continued. "It should have been yours originally, and your handling of this situation has only reinforced your qualifications for the role." The offer I had wanted so desperately just weeks ago now evoked complicated feelings. Did I still want to work for a company where this could happen? Could I trust the leadership team that had failed to recognize such calculated manipulation? Was advancement within Apex worth the emotional toll of the past months? "I appreciate the offer," I replied carefully. "But before I make a decision, I'd like to discuss some concerns about company culture and communication." Danielle leaned forward, her expression serious. "I'm listening." For the next hour, we had the most candid conversation of my 5-year tenure. I outlined the systemic issues that had allowed Rachel's sabotage to succeed. The emphasis on results without questioning methods, the insufficient security protocols for sensitive documents, the tendency to accept declining performance without investigating root causes. What happened wasn't just about Rachel, I explained. It was about an environment where her tactics could flourish undetected. To her credit, Danielle didn't become defensive. Instead, she acknowledged the validity of my concerns and shared her own thoughts on necessary changes. "We failed you," she admitted, "and it's revealed weaknesses in our culture and systems that need to be addressed regardless of whether you accept the promotion." We discussed concrete changes, new document security protocols, revised performance review processes that included peer feedback, and team-building initiatives to strengthen collaborative relationships. Danielle also committed to regular skip-level meetings where employees could share concerns directly with executive leadership. After considerable reflection and follow-up conversations with Danielle and Linda about implementing these changes, I accepted the promotion with specific conditions. 1. Authority to restructure team communication processes. 2. Direct input on security protocol development. 3. Leadership role in defining the department's ethical guidelines. 4. Monthly meetings with Danielle to address any emerging concerns. Mark would remain as director, but our working relationship would be redefined with clearer boundaries and expectations. He had shown genuine remorse and a commitment to improving his management approach, which made continued collaboration possible, if not immediately comfortable. The broader impact of Rachel's actions continued to ripple through the company. Many colleagues struggled with having been deceived, particularly those who had developed friendships with her. Team morale suffered initially as people processed what had happened and examined their own roles, whether active or passive, in allowing the situation to develop. "I should have noticed something was off," Tyler told me during a project meeting. Looking back, there were signs that didn't make sense at the time. "We all miss things," I assured him, working to rebuild the team's confidence alongside my own. "What matters is how we move forward." 3 months after accepting the promotion, I unexpectedly encountered Rachel while representing Apex at an industry conference. She was working for a competitor, her LinkedIn profile now listing her as a senior marketing strategist. Our eyes met across the exhibitor hall, and for a moment, neither of us looked away. She seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating than the figure who had loomed so large in my professional nightmare. I nodded slightly, acknowledging her presence without engaging further, then turned my attention back to the client conversation I was having. In that moment, I realized that while the experience had changed me, it no longer defined me. I had reclaimed not just my professional standing, but my confidence in my own perceptions and judgment. My first month as marketing manager brought both challenges and unexpected rewards. The team was still recovering from the disruption of Rachel's departure and the revelations about her behavior, creating an initial atmosphere of uncertainty and caution. Trust had been damaged not just between me and my colleagues, but throughout the department. I began by implementing transparent project management processes where all team members had visibility into workflows, approvals, and client communications. We adopted new collaborative software that tracked document versions and changes, creating automatic logs that would prevent the kind of stealthy alterations Rachel had executed. I know recent events have shaken everyone's confidence. I acknowledged in my first team meeting. We're going to rebuild trust through consistency, transparency, and open communication. Rather than pretending the Rachel situation hadn't happened, I addressed it directly but constructively, using it as a catalyst for positive change. We established weekly check-ins where team members could raise concerns about workload, resources, or interpersonal dynamics before small issues escalated into larger problems. My relationship with Mark evolved gradually. His initial awkwardness around me transformed into a more thoughtful approach to management. He began soliciting input before making decisions and showed greater attentiveness to team dynamics rather than focusing exclusively on deliverables. "I've been taking a leadership course," he mentioned during one of our one-on-one meetings. "One of the key principles is distinguishing between performance issues and contextual obstacles. I should have applied that thinking with you." Working with Linda became one of the most rewarding aspects of my new role. Her mentorship expanded from tactical career guidance to deeper discussions about leadership philosophy and building ethical workplace cultures. "You've handled this transition with remarkable grace," she observed after watching me lead a particularly challenging client meeting. "Many people would have become bitter or overly guarded after what you experienced." The truth was more nuanced than Linda realized. I had worked through periods of intense anger and resentment during the months of sabotage and investigation. I had questioned everything from my career choice to my judgment of character. The journey back to confidence had not been linear or easy. What ultimately helped most was channeling those difficult emotions into constructive change not just for myself, but for the entire organization. Within 3 months of assuming the marketing manager role, I had collaborated with IT to implement new security protocols, worked with HR to develop ethical guidelines for the department, and established mentoring relationships with junior team members to foster a culture of support rather than competition. The company as a whole began addressing the cultural issues that had allowed Rachel's behavior to continue unchecked for so long. Danielle initiated a company-wide review of management practices, bringing in external consultants to assess team dynamics and communication patterns. Skip-level meetings became regular practice, giving individual contributors direct access to leadership without their immediate managers present. Perhaps the most meaningful change came in how the company handled performance evaluations. Rather than focusing exclusively on metrics and deliverables, the new process incorporated feedback about collaboration, communication, and ethical conduct. Success was no longer defined solely by individual achievement, but included how team members supported collective goals. The BlackRock account, which had been at the center of the confrontation with Rachel, eventually became one of our most successful client relationships. After the rescheduled presentation where I presented my original strategy, they signed a 2-year contract with Apex and specifically requested me as their account lead. "We value transparency and integrity as much as creative excellence," BlackRock's CMO told Danielle. Jessica demonstrated all three during a difficult situation. Professionally, I found myself thriving in the management role I had long worked toward. My team consistently exceeded targets, and I was invited to join the company's strategic planning committee, giving me influence beyond my immediate department. The 30% salary increase that came with the promotion allowed me to finally pay off my student loans and begin saving for a down payment on a home. The unexpected benefits of the experience extended beyond my career advancement. I developed a new perspective on workplace relationships, more discerning, perhaps, but not fundamentally distrustful. I became more attuned to subtle dynamics within teams and more deliberate about creating environments where ethical behavior was rewarded and manipulation could not easily thrive. When a junior team member named Allison came to me 6 months into my new role, nervously reporting that she suspected a colleague was taking credit for her work, I recognized the importance of the moment. Rather than dismissing her concerns or demanding immediate proof, I listened carefully and helped her document the situation appropriately. "I was afraid you'd think I was being paranoid or competitive," she admitted after we resolved the situation through mediated conversation rather than escalation. "I understand better than most the difference between paranoia and pattern recognition," I assured her. "The key is addressing concerns directly with evidence and without assumptions." The experience with Rachel had transformed my approach to both leadership and self-advocacy. I became known within the company and eventually within the industry as someone who valued both results and process, who understood that how success was achieved mattered as much as the achievement itself. Occasionally, I still encounter situations that trigger memories of that difficult period. When documents are questioned or deadlines miscommunicated, I feel a momentary flash of the old anxiety. But these instances no longer send me into a spiral of self-doubt. Instead, I address them directly, investigate factually, and maintain perspective about the difference between honest mistakes and deliberate manipulation. The philosophical lessons from the experience have become core principles in my professional life. 1. Trust your perceptions when patterns emerge, even when others don't yet see them. 2. Document meticulously, not from a place of paranoia, but prudent self-protection. 3. Seek allies, but recognize that advocacy begins with you. 4. Understand that ethical leadership requires both vigilance against misconduct and creation of environments where misconduct cannot easily occur. Woo. Recognize that vindication doesn't automatically heal the wounds of betrayal that requires separate and intentional work. For those of you watching who might be experiencing similar situations in your own workplaces, I hope my story offers both caution and encouragement. The caution: workplace sabotage is real and more common than we might want to believe. The encouragement: it can be exposed and overcome with the right approach. Have you ever experienced or witnessed workplace sabotage? What signs did you notice first? And how did you handle it? Drop your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more honest conversations about navigating challenging professional situations. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that trusting their instincts isn't paranoia sometimes. It's self-preservation. Thank you for listening to my journey from sabotage to vindication. And remember that your professional worth isn't defined by others' attempts to diminish it.